Hello, everybody. To continue our conversation on language and symbols and symbology, I thought that we would look at one particular symbol in action, so to speak. When I was trying to figure out the best way to cover this week, I originally thought about just having kind of a grab bag, a magic mystery tour of just various different symbols, alchemaic, Talmudic, astrological, and whatnot. And I found that for me, that was, it was interesting, but it really didn't get to why symbols are so important to us and the power that they hold. And really, I think that for you, it's going to be a better learning experience and you're going to get more out of it if we delve into the why and not really go into all the different examples, because you can do the research on your own. You can find the examples out there. There are many excellent resources. One that I use quite frequently is the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols. It's an excellent book, which not very cheap. It's not very expensive. It's pretty cheap on Amazon. And so the information from this comes from a book called The Bear, The History of a Fallen King, by a French historian named Michel Pastoureau. And so in reading it, I was like, oh, this is perfect. And this is exactly what I want to talk about with my students. And so that's where we're coming from here. We're going to look at one particular symbol. In this case, it's going to be the bear. So we're going to cover the history of the bear. The bear begins as a god. It begins as a god, the king of the beasts, as a king maker, as akin to humans, and as time goes on, its power diminishes, its relevance diminishes due to various factors that we'll go into in more detail in just a little bit. And the fascinating thing is that this creature of reverence and power becomes more or less a companion to us, a toy, the teddy bear. And so it's a fascinating journey that the bear undergoes, and it opens up good areas of conversation as to the power of symbols and the way that this power, and that, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words a little bit, but the way that this power is important to us. There's some symbols that we hold on to, even though their original meanings may have changed over time. A quick proviso, though, we're going to be discussing the bear primarily as Europeans saw it, specifically Teutonic and Scandinavian peoples. Now, the bear as an animal is powerful symbol in many different cultures: Native American culture, Japanese, pretty much anywhere, any group of people who have had encounters with bears. But because Pastoureau focuses on Europe, that's where we're going to keep our focus. So let's begin with the bear as god. Early human beings often worshiped the bear, and it's possible, in fact, that bear cults were the first true religious communities when we were hunter-gatherers. Now, there is a little bit of, actually, there's a lot of contention in the historian community over whether this is true or not. I happen to believe that it is. The evidence seems pretty compelling to me, but just so you know, there are some historians who say, no, that's not right at all. Now, one of the, we're not going to run through all of the evidence for it, but one particular I want to talk about is that the oldest trace of this worship appears in Périgord, France, in the cave of Regordo. There, a Neanderthal grave is connected to the grave of a brown bear underneath two slabs of stone. This grave is over 80,000 years old. And so this was not a mistake. It's not like the human and the bear were sharing the cave and they died side by side. This was purposefully done. And so connecting these two in death is an incredibly powerful symbolic statement of the connection that we feel with the bear. Now, the bear was such an incredibly strong symbol, such a potent symbol, that he stood as a rival to Christ when Christian missionaries were moving up into Northern Europe. There are stories, there are accounts of Christian missionaries who saw bear cults, bear worships of bear ceremonies, and they were horrified by what they saw. These tended to be rather violent. And they often involved the eating of bear flesh, the drinking of bear blood in order to gain the power of the bear, and they were horrified. And try as they might, they could not dislodge the bear as an object of worship and replace it with Jesus. So, in order to get a toehold into this area, the church began a systematic campaign against the bear. It worked tirelessly to depower the bear, to remove it from its throne, more or less. And one of the major figures in this campaign was the Frankish king Charlemagne. Charlemagne, at the behest of the church, instituted 2 systematic campaigns of slaughter against the bear, first in 773 and then again in 785. This was after these were both done after victorious campaigns against the Saxons in that area. And so Charlemagne would subjugate the people in that area, and then he worked actively to destroy the symbol of their power, of their worship. And it worked. Spoiler alert, it worked. And and we're going to get into that in more detail in just a bit. Now, the bear as king. There's a lot of overlap regarding the bear as a god and regarding the bear as a king, and it's not that hard to understand. Kingliness, nobility, is often equated with divinity as well, and kings and queens are often viewed as more important symbolically. Their existence is important for the harmony of the heavens and the earth, and they're less involved with the everyday operations of the area. And so the bear is not just the god, but the bear is also this kingly fellow. As Michel Pastoureau says, at one point or another, every culture chooses a king of the beasts and makes it the centerpiece of its symbolic bestiary. Now, the choice of king of the beast, which animal is regarded as such, is based on its apparent invincibility. There is nothing that hunts this animal except human beings, as it turns out. There's no rival to it, and so this makes it the king of the beast. Now, historically, there have been 4 kings of the beast. There is the lion, the bear, the eagle, and the elephant. And so, all 4 of these animals are really, kind of at the top of their food chain. They don't have natural predators, as I said before. And because of this invincibility, we try to find ways to identify with them. We try to find ways to make that invincibility a part of our own selves. And so sometimes that involves hunting and killing this animal to prove our power. Sometimes it means that we eat the flesh and drink the blood or wear the hide in order to acquire it. Sometimes it's a little more esoteric, and we just choose it as our symbol in hopes that by identifying with it on that symbolic level, we gain some measure of its power. Now, the bear was so revered and feared that one could not call it by its name for fear of calling its attention on you. So there are a lot of alternate names, and this is just a grab bag. There are many more. The bear is called the grandfather, or the honey thief, honey paw, the old one of the forest, the kindly one, the one who hears everything. And so there's some interesting themes going on here. Certainly, it's love of honey. That's something that every culture identifies. Some Native American tribes called the bear the licker because of the way it uses its tongue to get honey. Also, there's this sense of age and power and masculinity. There's also, probably for me, the most interesting is the kindly one. And the reason that they do this is because it's a way to placate the bear and fend off its wrath. If you have something that it can be aggressive, that can, kill you if it chooses to, you don't want to get on its bad side. And so, you're trying to evoke its better instincts, for lack of a better term. Now, the bear was a kingmaker as well. For young men in some tribes, fighting and killing a bear was an obligation for admission into manhood. So when a young man reached a certain age, 16 or younger, depending on the tribe, the young man would have to go out and have to kill a bear in order to gain its power. And again, by killing this king of the beasts, by killing this godlike thing, that proves one's worth. In this case, we're talking about the worth of entering into the tribe, the culture of manhood, and becoming part of the hunters. Now, after a time, killing a bear became more important, and it wasn't something just that every man should do. It became something that it's something a king should do, or a chieftain, a tribal leader. And so, after a time, the bear became what was known as a royal game animal. And so this means that only kings and nobility could hunt it. Because if, you are a commoner and you killed a bear, that kind of proves your worth better than, perhaps the man who is ruling who has not done so. And so kings were really trying to, prevent this from happening. In a lot of Germanic and Scandinavian lore also, there are tales of bears kidnapping women, having sex with them, and those women producing these half-men, half-bear offspring. And typically in the lore, they are such powerful warriors that they rise up to leadership positions. And there's all kinds of different examples of this sense of kinship between humanity and the bear. We tend to view the bear as a cousin to us in some ways. And so there's this kinship, there's this worship, but there's also this almost deeper connection to it that plays out over the history of the symbol. One other example I wanted to share about the Kingmaker and just the power of it and wanting to gain it is that there are a group of warriors in Scandinavia who wore shirts made of bear hide when in order to gain the power of the bear. And so they were called, and they were feared for their ferocity, their fearlessness, and their power on the battlefield. And they were called bear shirters. And after a while, the word, the term became compressed, and they became berserkers later. So this is actually where we get the term berserker from. So returning to the lore of the bear and the bear as kingmaker, there is a really interesting theory about King Arthur that ties him to this line of bear kings. Now, because the tale of King Arthur is so revered and has been told so many different times by so many different people, you're going to get a lot of variation. And so, Sir Thomas Mallory's account of King Arthur is going to be different from T.H. White's. And they're going to be different from the original oral tales that the Britons used to tell themselves. And so, for whatever reason, a lot of the bear aspects were lost over time. But there's some really tantalizing clues. The first is his name has the bear in it. The Irish word for bear is art. In Gaul, they call bear artos. In Welsh, it's arth. And in Breton, it's ars. So you can see in his name, there's bear right there. Now, perhaps the greatest evidence comes in his death and return. In literary traditions, Arthur dies and is taken to the Isle of Avalon on November 11th. Now, November 11th is also the time of the Great Festival of the Bear, usually to commemorate when the bears began preparing for hibernation. And so, the connection here, not just in terms of the date, is also that Arthur is not truly dead. He's only sleeping. He sleeps to waiting for England's time of greatest need. So one could say that he's hibernating. So just a little something interesting I wanted to throw out there because I'm a big Arthurian legend nut. So the bear, unfortunately, could not keep its throne. And a lot of that had to do with the Catholic Church. The Church's campaign against the bear was so successful that he really lost his place as king of the beasts and as the symbol of worship and royalty. After a time, the bear wasn't even a royal game animal anymore. The bear kings started keeping what were called menageries, small private zoos, and the centerpiece of that was the bear. And symbolically, you can see the power of this. This great, noble, powerful animal, muzzled and chained for the king's amusement. But after a time, that faded away as well, and really, the lion took over. The lion became the usurper to the throne, again because of the Christian Church. Because for whatever reason, the church felt that this animal better represented its ideals. This was, the animal of nobility and power that they wanted to associate themselves with, not the bear. And so the bear never really recovered from this. The bear as an object of worship and love really lost its prominence, especially in Europe. But we couldn't let go of the bear as a species. There is something in this animal, some reflection, something that we project onto it and personify that is so unique and powerful and deeply psychological and sociological. And so we held on to it. We just changed what it meant. And so what began as a king, a god, a symbol of invincibility became a companion and source of comfort thanks to President Teddy Roosevelt and an ambitious toy maker. The story goes that Roosevelt was out on a hunting trip. This was back when he was president, and he had a couple of aides with him. Now, Roosevelt hadn't caught anything, and he was perfectly fine with that, but the aides were scandalized. They felt like if the president didn't catch an animal, then this would be shameful for whatever reason. And they stumbled across this bear cub, and they tied it up, but made it so that Roosevelt wouldn't see that it was tied because they knew he wouldn't shoot a helpless animal. And so they said, "Oh, Mr. President, there's this bear. Let's get him before he runs away." And so Roosevelt levels his gun at the bear, and he lowers it and says, "I could not look my boys in the face if I shot a bear." And so this just took off like wildfire. The story got out. It was reprinted in all the papers, and a pretty famous political cartoon celebrating this moment was done. And so a man named Morris Mitchton saw this cartoon, and he saw it as an opportunity. Mitchton was a Russian immigrant living in New York, and he made his money, by making little toys, selling candy, things like that. So when he saw the cartoon, he asked his wife to make a stuffed toy that would look like the cub that Roosevelt spared. And so this was kind of a unique moment in the history of toys, because for a very long time, the phenomenon of playing with dolls and toys. I should rephrase that. For a very long time, the playing with dolls and toys fashioned after animals was frowned upon. The medieval Christian church did not want people to make objects and figures based on animals because it might be considered idolatrous or being used for magical purposes. And so really playing with dolls and toys fashioned after animals is something that's fairly new and really kind of began after the Industrial Revolution and various other factors that we won't go into here. And so the Mitchton's wife made the bear out of wool, which is important because it was, fairly soft material. She also made it have arms and legs, which, according to the research I've done, is kind of revolutionary. That really wasn't something that a lot of people did at the time. Now, what was brilliant about this, though, was that Mitchton actually asked permission from the White House to call it Teddy after the president. The White House thought about it for a little while, and they finally gave their okay, and it was a huge success. Mitchton got more orders than he could fulfill, and so that's why we call them teddy bears now. The interesting thing about this is that there actually is some argument over who should get credit for the creation of the stuffed bear. Mitchton gets the credit for calling him Teddy, but there is another person who created a stuffed bear around the same time. Her name was Marguerite Steiff, and she was German. She lived in Giangen, Swabia. She was paralyzed by polio from a young age, and because of that, was really unable to work or get out of the house. Now, her town was famous for making felt. And so what she would do to help, buy the time and support her family's income is people would bring her scraps of felt left over from the various processes, and she would make little animals out of them that her nieces and sisters would sell at the market. Now, these were, small little things, and they were just heads and bodies of animals. Well, one day, one of her nephews sent her a drawing of a bear copied from a zoo flyer. Her nephew was going to university in Berlin, and they had a new exhibition with a bear cub. And so, to promote this attraction, they sent out these flyers, and he's like, "Oh, you should make a animal that looks like this." And so she did, and she did a couple of very important things when she made this bear. Number one, she made it out of wool instead of felt, which is wool is a softer fabric than felt, and she also gave it articulated arms and legs. She then sent it to the Leipzig Toy Fair, and the European investors looked at it and they were unimpressed, but an American wholesaler saw it and he went ape nuts over it. So much so that he ordered 3,000 to be made. And so some people think that he knew about Mitchton's bear, and so he was wanting to get in on this at the ground level, but that's just supposition right now. It's really, there's no hard and fast evidence to that. So, Morris Mitchton or Marguerite Steiff, one of the two gets the credit for the creation of the bear, and we're not exactly sure who. So, because I'm a good academic, this is my references page, and to kind of sum up, it seems that we can't get away from bears. We are inextricably tied to them. And the fact that we still feel the need to craft representations of them illustrate their power as a symbol. We just don't want to let the bear go. And so I think this is important to talk about because, we can talk about all the different symbols out there till the cows come home, and that would be fun and interesting, but again, as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, it's not going to really give you this idea of the staying power and the reason why we hold on to symbols so importantly. It seems in some ways that the symbol itself is more important than the meaning that we affix to it. I mean, look, the bear. It begins as this god and king, this invincible animal that we want to destroy and emulate. And then it becomes what you see on the screen, this companion, this something to keep you safe from the monsters at night, or somebody to whisper your secrets to, or just to share adventures with. And so there's a power here. It speaks to us on a deeply psychological level. And so tapping into that and understanding that will help you make much more strategic and powerful uses of them in your own writing. So that brings us to the end. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And I hope you found this as interesting and informative as I did. So have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to reading your stuff.